Something extraordinary is happening in the land of Israel, something ancient, something prophetic, something that has been dormant for nearly 2,000 years is now stirring again. In the very streets where prophets once walked, where the temple once stood in sacred silence, a quiet but undeniable preparation is unfolding. And if you're not paying attention, you might miss it entirely. The descendants of Levi, the priestly tribe chosen by God Himself, are rising. Not metaphorically, literally. They're being identified, trained, purified. Their garments are being tailored, their voices retrained for sacred chants, their hands taught to handle sacred fire. For centuries, this seemed like folklore, a story held together by dusty scrolls and fading memory. But now it's flesh and blood. Now it's real. And it's happening right now. The world is busy chasing progress, arguing over politics, and drifting into spiritual numbness. But in Jerusalem, something far more eternal is taking shape. A priesthood is returning. A temple is being imagined not as a relic, but as a reality. And all of this, every step, every trumpet blast, every white robe sewn, echoes something we've been told all along. The prophecies are not just symbolic, they're literal. And they're being fulfilled before our eyes. You see, this isn't about culture. It's not about history. It's not even just about Israel. It's about the timeline of God, the one that's always been ticking, hidden behind the noise of our everyday lives. Scripture never told us to guess. It told us to watch, to observe, to know the season even if we don't know the day or hour. And this season, right now, is unlike anything the world has seen since the Second Temple was reduced to ash and rubble. If the temple is God's calendar, then the priests are the hands of that clock, and they're moving. The question is, are we? Are we watching the signs or sleeping through the trumpet blasts? Because prophecy isn't poetry, it's warning. It's mercy. It's God's way of calling His people to alignment before fulfillment strikes like lightning dot. So as the Levites step forward, as the utensils glisten once again in golden light, as the ancient songs echo once more through Jerusalem's hills, listen closely. Because what's rising in Israel isn't just tradition. It's a countdown, asterisk. For most of history, it was assumed the priesthood was gone. When the Romans tore down the Second Temple in 70 AD, they didn't just destroy a building, they scattered a lineage. The sons of Aaron, the Kohanim, who once ministered before the presence of God, vanished into exile, their identity buried under centuries of silence and displacement. For many, the priesthood became a memory, a role lost to time, a function that belonged to another era. But God never loses track of what He chooses, hidden within family traditions, locked in oral histories, and even inscribed in names like Cohen or Levi. The identity of these priestly descendants quietly survived. And in our time, with the help of both ancient records and modern science, this lineage has begun to emerge again. What once felt like a myth is being verified by DNA. Incredibly, researchers have identified a distinct genetic marker on the Y chromosome, passed from father to son, shared by many men with known Levitical or priestly heritage. They call it the Cohen modal haplotype. But for those watching prophecy, it's much more than a scientific discovery. It's confirmation. Think about that. A priesthood silenced for nearly 2 millennia, now walking back into the light with genetic evidence in hand. This isn't coincidence. It's orchestration. It's the fulfillment of what God spoke through the prophets, that He would regather not just the nation, but the priesthood itself. Not only the land but the servants of the sanctuary. For those who bear this lineage, this awakening isn't just historical. It's deeply personal. Imagine discovering that your family wasn't just part of history. It was chosen by God to carry out His worship. That your bloodline traces back to the fire of Mount Sinai, to Aaron who stood before the altar, to those who once offered incense in the holy place. It's not a metaphor. It's a divine Inheritance. And with that realization comes responsibility. These men, many of whom lived secular lives just decades ago, are now reclaiming ancient roles. They're studying Torah, learning the intricate laws of sacrifice, purifying themselves, and preparing their hearts for a task that hasn't been performed in almost 2,000 years. They're not actors in a reenactment. They're heirs to a mandate. The rediscovery of the priesthood is a signpost. It tells us that God hasn't abandoned his covenants. He's reactivating them. The pieces are returning to the board. And if he's restoring the priesthood, it can only mean one thing. The temple is next. The temple in Jerusalem may have been destroyed, but it never truly disappeared. For centuries, it has lived on, not in stone, but in the hearts and hopes of a scattered people. Burned to the ground, its golden vessels looted, its walls toppled, and still, the temple breathes. It survives in scripture, in prayer, in prophecy. It refuses to die because God never declared it dead. Every Jewish wedding ends with the smashing of a glass, a symbol of sorrow for the lost temple, even in the midst of joy. Every Passover ends with the words, "Next year in Jerusalem," not merely as a wish to return, but as a longing to see the temple restored. For 2,000 years, that longing has passed from generation to generation, silent, aching, unfulfilled. But now in our time, that longing is turning into preparation. The Temple Institute in Jerusalem isn't a museum. It's a prophetic workshop. Inside, artisans craft golden menorahs, priests are fitted for linen garments, and blueprints for the third temple are drawn with architectural precision. These aren't conceptual dreams, they're tangible, physical realities. Every item required for temple worship, from the altar of incense to the ark's outer chamber, is being reconstructed, waiting for their moment in history. Like a play rehearsing for an opening night, everything is in place. Only the curtain has yet to rise. But what makes this even more astonishing is that these efforts are not fringe. They're supported by rabbis, scholars, donors, and even politicians who believe that the rebuilding of the temple is not optional, it's inevitable. To them, it's not a question of if. It's a question of when. And that when feels closer than ever. In an age where secularism dominates much of the world, how can it be that the holiest structure in biblical history is quietly being prepared? How is it that in a time of spiritual confusion, the ancient worship of the Most High is being revived with exact detail? It's because God's calendar doesn't run on Western time. While the world sleeps, prophecy marches forward. And the temple, the place where heaven once met earth, refuses to vanish. This isn't nostalgia, it's alignment. Because the temple isn't just about bricks and rituals. It's about presence. It's about access. It's about God's dwelling among men. And for that to happen again, the temple must rise again. Which is exactly why the priesthood is being restored, why the instruments are being rebuilt, why the blueprints are being studied. Because whether the world is ready or not, something sacred is preparing to return. What's happening in Israel isn't happening in a vacuum. The world is watching closely. From political leaders to prophetic communities, from Christian ministries to geopolitical analysts, there's an increasing awareness that something significant is stirring in Jerusalem. It's not just about religion, it's about timing. And the shift is global. The re-emergence of the Levitical priesthood, the talk of rebuilding the temple, and the rise of messianic expectations are no longer fringe topics relegated to obscure corners of the internet. These discussions are taking place in parliaments, pulpits, and think tanks. Because everyone, whether they believe the Bible or not, understands one truth. When something shakes in Israel, the whole world feels the tremor. Why does this matter to nations far from the Middle East? Because the Temple Mount is not just a hill. It's the most contested piece of real estate on earth. It's the epicenter of three world religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Any move toward rebuilding a Jewish temple on that sacred ground would ignite not only spiritual fervor, but global controversy. Wars have started over less peace. Treaties have collapsed over words spoken about it. And yet, the preparations continue, quietly, steadily, with an urgency that feels prophetic. For Christians who study biblical prophecy, this moment is deeply symbolic. The Bible speaks of a third temple, one that will stand during the time of the end, one that will be defiled and desecrated, one that marks the countdown toward Christ's return. Paul, Daniel, John, they all foresaw it. And now, what was once interpreted allegorically is being built quite literally. This convergence of faith, politics, and prophecy is drawing eyes from every continent. Evangelical Christians, particularly in the West, are watching these developments with a mix of awe and anticipation. Many support Israel financially and spiritually, believing that what happens in Jerusalem is connected to the destiny of the world. At the same time, global powers like Iran, Turkey, and even Russia speak in increasingly apocalyptic terms, referencing Jerusalem as the focal point of their ideological and religious visions. Asterisk. The nations are watching not because they understand everything, but because they sense something. A shift. A fulfillment. A rising tension that feels both ancient and imminent. And when nations watch, so do their people. Because somewhere, deep inside the human soul is the understanding that history is not random, it's directed. And if Israel is the hour hand, then the temple is the alarm bell. This isn't about nationalism. It's about prophecy crossing over into reality. And every step forward on the Temple Mount sends a ripple through the nations, because what begins in Jerusalem never stays in Jerusalem. Asterisk. Among all the requirements for the temple to function, one stands out as both obscure and essential. The red heifer. It's not just an animal. It's the key to purity. According to Numbers 19, only the ashes of a completely red, unblemished heifer can purify the priesthood and the people from the defilement of death. Without it, the rituals of the temple cannot resume. No sacrifices, no incense, no access to the sacred. And for nearly 2,000 years, such a heifer has been absent from history. Until now. In recent years, something extraordinary has occurred. Several red heifers, flawless, unblemished, and born under strict conditions, have been transported from Texas to Israel. Their arrival was met with quiet celebration among temple activists and prophetic anticipation among believers worldwide. Why? Because the presence of a valid red heifer signals that purification could begin at any moment. The priesthood could be consecrated. The temple could be initiated. It means the final obstacle to restoration is being removed, not symbolically, but physically. But there's a catch. These heifers must remain completely spotless, not even 2 hairs of another color, until they reach the proper age. One blemish, one imperfection, and the process resets. That's why this moment is a race against time. The clock is ticking. The heifers are growing. Every day is a countdown to either qualification or disqualification. It's not just prophetic suspense. It's agricultural prophecy in motion. This is more than ceremonial detail. It's profound. Because the red heifer represents cleansing from death, and in a world increasingly marked by violence, confusion, and spiritual darkness, the longing for purity has never been greater. This ancient command is suddenly echoing into a modern world desperate for clarity. And that's no coincidence. God speaks through symbols, and few are as loaded with meaning as the red heifer. Interestingly, some rabbis believe the ashes of only 9 red heifers have been used throughout history, and that the 10th would be prepared in the days of the Messiah. So the appearance of multiple eligible heifers in our time has set off alarms, not of panic, but of expectation. Could we be nearing the threshold of that 10th preparation? Could the long-awaited purification be at hand? The answer lies not in theory, but in timing. As the heifers mature, the priesthood prepares. As DNA confirms identity, blueprints await construction. It's all connected, like gears in a divine mechanism clicking into place. And the red heifer, often overlooked in sermons and stories, now stands at the center of prophecy's stage, quietly, patiently, as if waiting for its appointed hour. Asterisk, if prophecy were easy, it wouldn't require faith. And when it comes to rebuilding the temple, the greatest obstacle isn't funding or logistics, it's the mountain itself. The Temple Mount is the most contested religious site in the world. And while Jews revere it as the holiest place on earth, it is currently dominated by Islamic structures, the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque, under strict religious and political control. Any mention of Jewish prayer, let alone construction, ignites outrage, both locally and globally. This is no ordinary political dispute. It's spiritual warfare disguised as diplomacy. The Temple Mount is the place where Abraham prepared to sacrifice Isaac, where the Holy of Holies once stood, where God's presence dwelled among his people. But today, it's surrounded by barriers, surveillance, and tension so high that even a whispered prayer can lead to international headlines. Attempts to ascend the mount are carefully regulated. Jews are often forbidden to pray aloud. Temple activists are monitored, and any discussion about reclaiming the space is immediately labeled as provocation. Why? Because everyone knows if the temple is rebuilt, the world changes. Status quos are threatened. Religious narratives collide, and power shifts. That's why opposition is fierce. Because the enemy doesn't fear religion, he fears fulfillment. Yet, the opposition isn't just external. It's internal too. Within Judaism, there are deep divisions. Some ultra-Orthodox groups oppose any effort to build the temple until the Messiah arrives. Others believe preparation is a form of obedience, a sign of faith that hastens his coming. This debate has created tension within the religious community, delaying unified action even as prophetic signs align with stunning clarity. And then there's the global backlash. The United Nations has passed resolutions denying Jewish historical claims to the Temple Mount. World leaders urge peaceful coexistence, often a euphemism for political paralysis. The media frames temple efforts as extremist, inflammatory, or dangerous. But what they fail to understand is this: biblical prophecy was never meant to be politically correct. It was meant to be fulfilled, sometimes quietly, sometimes explosively, but always according to God's timing. Still, the battle is real. Every attempt to take even a symbolic step forward is met with resistance. But that resistance, rather than discouraging faith, confirms it. Because the moment prophecy moves from words on a page to action in reality, the opposition always increases. Just like Nehemiah rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem, every stone comes with a battle. Every gate, a sword. Every prayer, a price. Yet the faithful continue, quietly, steadily. Because the temple isn't about domination, it's about restoration. It's not about erasing others. It's about returning to the place where God once met man. And even with resistance, the preparations do not stop. Because prophecy delayed is not prophecy denied. It's just prophecy on schedule. Asterisk, there comes a moment in every prophetic timeline where symbols become substance, hints become headlines. And what was once dismissed as distant suddenly becomes undeniable. That moment, the convergence is no longer just coming. It's unfolding. We're living in a time unlike any other. In Israel, priests are training, garments are ready, and the altar has been dedicated. In the global church, believers are waking up, shaking off slumber, and discerning the signs of the times. And on the Temple Mount, though guarded, disputed, and restricted, the eyes of the world are fixed. Because whether they admit it or not, everyone senses the same thing. We're nearing a tipping point. Prophecy has always moved in patterns, slow builds, sudden shifts. For decades, the pieces have been forming, often unnoticed. But now, the gears are locking into place. It's not just the red heifers. It's not just the Levites. It's the collective movement, political, spiritual, historical, toward a singular, inevitable moment. The moment where the third temple is no longer just prophesied, but present. And when that moment comes, everything will change. The Bible tells us that a rebuilt temple will play a central role in the final chapter of human history. Paul speaks of a man of sin who will enter it and exalt himself. Revelation describes a measuring of the temple before judgment begins. Daniel foresaw a covenant confirmed, sacrifices ceased, and desolation unleashed. These aren't abstract metaphors. These are event markers, prophetic timestamps on eternity's calendar. So, what does this mean for us? It means the luxury of spiritual indifference is over. It means that our generation may witness what prophets only saw in visions. It means that the time to prepare is not later. It's now. This is not a call to panic. It's a call to clarity. God doesn't reveal the future to instill fear. He reveals it to awaken faith. The convergence of signs, the revival of priesthood, the nearing of the temple, all of it is shouting one truth. History is headed somewhere, and Jesus is coming soon. For the skeptic, these developments may feel coincidental. But for the believer, they confirm what we've always known, that God keeps His promises, fulfills His word, and never forgets His covenant. The pieces may seem political, but their roots are spiritual. And the one who spoke through prophets is now speaking through history. The temple will rise. The world will react. And the choice will be ours, to watch passively or to prepare actively. Because prophecy is not entertainment. It's a warning and a gift. A divine announcement that time is short, eternity is near, and the King is coming.